No D&D is better than bad D&D. Advice I'm sure we've all heard in these videos quite often before. That is because there is merit to it. Having no game at all is significantly better than playing in a game with a that guy or a disgusting DM. However, I believe there is a simple and even common explanation as to why these people don't simply just leave when they are encountering these horrible experiences. And this story I have brought to you today explains it better than I ever could. It is a long one, yes, but I promise you, it's a very fun one. Pep, the myth, the regret, and I'm relieved to say we never met. By user, Shameful Am I. Beware all who treasure their good mood. Beware the trials and tribulations I bring to you. Beware the novel-length retelling of years of anger, near abuse, and desecration. My first TTRPG game was over 10 years ago with a particular GM we are all going to get well acquainted with today. Pep. Was he a good GM? Oh, absolutely not. Was he even decent? No. Set your expectations on the floor of Satan's cellar, and then lower them even further. That's it. Yes, as far as it can go. The world's best limbo dancer would cry. I began playing games with Pep online at around the age of 17. He was around 15. He started off benign, unsuspecting, like a diamond in the rough, but instead of a diamond, he was a turd in murky water. Arc 1. The smell that could not be found. His first game with me was a regular dungeon crawler where I played a young cleric girl. I didn't know much of what to do, so my character was extremely basic. We all had fun despite our inexperience. The game was, I dare say, fine. Things didn't stay like this, unfortunately. He loved calling himself God at that point, that many GMs do, and it can mean something or nothing, depending on the person. Pep, however, was only just beginning to understand what he could get away with as a GM, much like a McDonald's manager. That first game was the only game Pep ever had multiple sessions for. From that point onward, he would only get as far as 1 or 2 sessions into a game and then scrap the entire thing. His all-time favorite pastime seemed to be character creation, because howdy fucking hey did we do that constantly. No hate to anyone who likes building characters. We were all on board at the time because we loved hanging out and having fun. I specifically note this because it will be a constant downward theme going forward. And his character creation sessions? Oh, his character creation sessions. They became a horrific place of character death and defilement. A permanent personality trait of his now, I am assured. Years and games go by after our first game. We create character after character, yet never play. I'm now around 19 at this point in time. Pep decides he wants to run a game built around an art show we end up getting sucked into. Willy Wonka meets Wizard of Oz. I decide to make a vagabond girl who's lived on the streets. A bit of a rough life, where little phases her anymore, but she has heart. Session 1. We get thrown into Fantasyland. We begin exploring the land of paintings when we come across a man hanging on to life after an attack. We question him before he passes, as he was someone else trapped in the paintings. My character kneels beside him and asks if anything could bring him comfort. What does Pep do? What could he possibly do? Perhaps answer my question? Perhaps move the story along? Something logical to match the course of the game up until this point, right? Oh, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Pep had been waiting for this moment like a bandit waiting for road prey. The dying man reached and grabbed my character's ass and kneaded it. Did he say anything? Nope. Mouth-breathing Pep was waiting in anticipation for his wildest Skype call porno fantasies to play out in front of him. I, as a player, sat in stunned silence. Eventually, I numbly said my character was unfazed, because she'd seen some shit and I didn't even know how to tell everyone I was too uncomfortable to act. Pep sat there for over 30 minutes. 30 real fucking minutes, bouncing back and forth between silent, I assume listening to me, and asking me over and over again what I wanted to do. All the other players didn't speak. They didn't laugh. They didn't find the words to even protest. Like a turd briefly floating to the surface, I saw a brief nugget of Pep's true self in that moment. I was afraid. Eventually, Pep finally clued in that nothing was going to happen and declared that the man kept touching my character for a while before finally dying. We left him, finished the session, and Pep never returned to that game. Thank the turd heavens it was over. It was over, wasn't it? No. Arc 2. It was only the beginning. Eventually, Pep decided to run a game about a band of wanderers in a fantasy world. Other members of the party included a freedom fighter for his slave kind, a druid that was the bringer of the apocalypse, and more. They were all incredibly interesting in their own rights. I sat in on character creation with the group and listened to the others build their characters. At the end of the night, I was ready to craft mine. I threw the idea out to Pep that I wanted to play this lass who's in her late 30s. I wanted her backstory to essentially be finding the man who's made her a widow, bring down the mercenary group that betrayed her, and find peace with what's left of her life, learn to trust again, be her own person. The good stuff. It wasn't too crazy. Hell, many may even think it's basic. What did Pep think of this? Too complicated. He told me to take out the husband, take out the education, take out the revenge plot and betrayal. He told me I wasn't using that backstory. And then he simply informed me that my backstory was, you are a mercenary for hire. And not a word more. Years pass by again. We create characters we never use. Pep continuously tells me that my character backgrounds are too complicated and reduces them to single-cell organisms with names. Pep then decides to run a play-by-post apocalyptic game instead. I have a theory. I make a male character this time. I give him a big backstory and motivation for why he's there, his personality, what he wants, and what he'll do to get it. And Pep approves it. I rejoice! We play, and Pep adds a new player to the game that we'll call Yowie. Yowie was, in all kind regards, a bag of dicks. Yowie made a carbon copy of Sombra from Overwatch, including calling his character Sombra. Pep approved this character. Seems he was charitable to all. Rejoice! Why aren't you rejoicing? We began the game, and I immediately got into my character and world and started helping NPCs in need. I was tied into the backstory and was visibly having fun. Yowie did not like this. His Sombra was supposed to be the center of attention, despite his genius refusal to be tied to the world. This meant no one was seeking her, because Sombra was completely antagonistic and shut off from all contact or emotion. The audacity of us collectively, it would seem. But fuck me in particular. Sombra has decided to hunt down my detective and corner him in his own room, then began screaming our word. Why? Carpe diem. Sombra, probably. Our characters hadn't even spoken, because as previously mentioned, Sombra was purposely avoiding others. But Pep liked where this was going, made his loins itch. Probably in a bad way, like he needed to wash. Our third player, Eddie, entered the room upon hearing screams of our word. Ed was wrote to be acquainted with my detective. We were bros in the apocalypse. What did Pep do? He made Eddie roll to be persuaded by Sombra that I was an R-wordist. To paint a picture, my detective was backed in a corner, trying to get away from Sombra, and Sombra was blocking me from the door while yelling R-word and smiling. You would think, maybe, deception or related skills should be rolled, or maybe no forceful rolling between players. But Pep let all of that slide to keep this conversation going. Sombra was successful. Pep declared that Eddie believed I was an R-wordist regarding the scene. To what end? We will never know. At that point, Sombra had Ed, forced by Pep, hold my character down while Sombra made demands. I don't remember what all these demands were, but one of them that I was required to inform the whole facility that my detective was an R-wordist. I assumed to give Sombra a better standing she could have just simply started with. We ignored the demands and continued to play the game. Me and Eddie agreed that the whole scene was somewhat fucked and decided to not relate back to it again. But Sombra and Pep didn't end there. We as a group finally headed out into the apocalypse wastelands to forage for supplies. Sombra, as subtle as a chainsaw, kept trying to bring out enemies to swarm us by making a lot of noise. It did not work. I assume not even the monsters wanted to be associated with her. We came across a group of survivors that insisted we put our hands up to prove we're decent people before approaching. Sombra, unprovoked, immediately attacked the camp, causing them to attack us back. Even Pep couldn't support Olympic mental gymnastics like that. Combat started, me, Eddie, and the camp of survivors all raced to kill Sombra the fastest. Pep declares Sombra died and that the camp and us reached an agreement that we all mutually respected each other for collectively hating Sombra. Yowie drops, "Oh yeah, I wanted Sombra to die." No. Please don't tell. I really wanted to play a different character, so I got her killed on purpose. Yowie, you absolute fucking donut. Pep is speechless. He eventually worked out that Yowie could have just said that instead of, purposely trying to kill everyone else as some kind of revenge. Nah, Yowie wanted a reroll, so he rerolled. He created a new character as part of this new survivor camp we found, and as an act of goodwill, we were all taking this guy along on a mission for the camp. We agree. We go. What does Yowie fucking do? He begins acting wildly inept, grabbing metal trash cans and beating them together to make noise, luring monsters to us as a distraction in a long alleyway with no exit point but backwards. We survive, we move on, we find our objective, a fight breaks out, and we learn we must question a crime lord's minion to learn the crime lord's whereabouts. We keep one minion alive to ask questions to, and then take a break from all our combat. This is Yowie's camp's mission. Yowie waits until all of us leave the room for a moment's breath, asks 2 questions of the minion, which are akin to, what's your favorite color? And if grass were a sound, what color would its personality be? And then hurriedly killed the only living minion before anyone could return to stop him. When we return, Yowie tells us how the minion just won't talk and he had to put him down. We could all read the chats. We all literally read what he did. We had eyes, despite his belief in otherwise. Even Pep acknowledged the entire exchange was like reading the diary of a troglodyte. But we let it all go and officially gave up on that side quest. We picked up another quest to help some random survivors we found, and Yowie continued to try to kill me, them, or everyone else with his purposely loud, violent, or obnoxious actions. Pep never said no to any of it. This continued on relentlessly until Pep officially canceled the game. Of course, not before Yowie could break in to say that he just really wasn't having any fun. Around this time, Pep ran games with other groups. One of them had a lovely trans lady in them. I adored her. She was still transitioning and thus had a deep voice. One day, this lady asked to be correctly gendered. How did Pep the Thoughtful respond? He is a man, so I'm going to refer to him as a man. He is not a woman. He sounds like a man, so that makes him a man. So let's stop fucking talking about it, okay? As you can imagine, she stopped showing up soon after. I didn't know how to process this. I was disgusted. No one else spoke up. Was I crazy? What the absolute fuck? Arc 3. The smell was unbearable. Why didn't I just leave? One day, Pep decided to run a one-shot between me and an old player. It was quick and not too complicated. As we bring down the BBEG at the end, we realize my character's NPC friend has been mortally wounded. I clutch him to comfort him as he dies, thinking this will have some kind of emotional weight to it. What do you think Pep immediately did? If you guessed sexually assault my character, you would be right! The NPC grabbed onto my PC's ass and said, "I touched the butt," and then instantly died. Smiling, Pep noted. Riveting. I narrated that I dropped his corpse like an overly heated potato. I then left. If you may recall, I brought up earlier that I was testing what backstories passed by Pep, right? Pep informed me that he was going to be running a new game soon. I wrote up a lady PC, going through the motions of describing life from a young age over how she was raised to her more recent life and how it had formed her. What motivations she's left with, why she's after them, how they push her. All of it is a really long, interwoven, ready-to-be-developed through play plot that I wanted to work with Pep to fit into his game, to justify that my character was spec'd out to be a work-in-progress, artist of disguise and courtly intrigue. I was enraptured with the playstyle. What do you think Pep immediately did? If you guessed, scrapped, you're a mercenary for hire, as my new backstory, you would be right. That's not all. I got a 2-for-1. Pep's such a marketer. Who could believe the savings? Eddie, that player from the last arc, was joining us. Eddie and I were going to join together with my disguise character and his deception wizard to create a traveling magic and music show that was all smoke and mirrors. I was going to be pretending to be a bard with a harp, while Eddie played entirely fake music and other magical additions. We really looked forward to it. Until Pep declared we were both mercenaries for hire, with musical instruments. Eddie wasn't the only other player to join us. Abraham was joining, and his character was literally Abraham Lincoln time-warped into the fantasy D&D world and turned into a frat boy. I joined Abraham and Pep for their character creation session and listened to the whole thing. Eddie was not present. When they finished building Abraham, Pep informed him as to what my character would be, a mercenary for hire that played the flute, apparently. And then, somehow, Pep began to describe a scene to Abraham. He began narrating how my character probably does put on shows. Naked, legs spread open on a stage, playing her flute with her lips. He uttered far more detail than I have. Abraham was cackling and cheering it on, describing what he was imagining, which was the depiction of a full fornication with said flute. I imagine at this point you can begin to see how Pep's favorite pastime was character creation. Truly, he was doing me a favor by repeatedly stripping my characters of all worth, degrading them, and getting off on defiling them. And you may be wondering, why did I keep playing with him? Why did I put up with it from the moment he started being a creep? I feared being a stick in the mud to the group of friends I had. I feared losing my only ability to play games by cutting off the only group of people I had in the hobby. I feared being told I was overreacting, that I was too emotional. At that point, I had been conditioned to play male characters because Pep didn't censor them. He didn't sexually assault them. But with my final character, I hit my final straw with Pep. I had a revelation. I didn't need Pep anymore. Arc 4. I could leave, but the stink clung. I began running games for myself. I got my own players, kept Eddie, and found a new group for myself. By the time I ran to second game, Pep was interested in hanging around and reading the game. I was running play-by-hosts. I agreed, as he couldn't do anything to me at that point. It was a long time since I was part of his revolting spank bank. He noticed, partway through my second game, that I had a villain in the game that was a creepy guy who kept inappropriately hitting on women. Pep began to hyper-focus on this villain, commenting every so often that he's just misunderstood. This laughably bad villain eventually went as far as to kidnap another NPC, alas, to commit a murder-suicide for being rejected. One PC stopped him. Hurrah! Crisis averted. Despite the mini-villain being creepy, I specifically state in my games that sexual assault and similar bad topics are banned. The villain NPC was only ever just verbally creepy, with a side of crazy. Pep, however, was angry. He felt personally wronged by the PC who took down the villain. Pep declared that the villain was just a nice guy, and that the PC was the actual douchebag. He ranted about how apparently nice guys finish last and douchebags win again. Full incel. Full description of women as objects. I had decided Pep could, in fact, suck on a whole bag of eggs. At that point, I was wholly done with Pep. I no longer spoke to him, but I feared blocking him may cut me off from the other players I cared for and didn't want to lose. I did not realize at the time that they too never stopped him. Thus, I resumed ignoring Pep. I avoided him, I felt guilty for having never stood up to him, never stopping his awful fucking behavior. I was scared he would begin to target me again. We had been friends for almost 10 years at that point, and I finally realized we never were. Arc 5. The water left the bowl, and only the turd remained. I learned, to the point of bitterness, it would seem, because I was a salty fucking sailor at that point. One day a couple years back, Pep asked me to partake in a pirate game of his. I decided I would, and that I was going to play a woman and do whatever the fuck I wanted. I would tell him to choke on the thickest sticks. Whatever. And I joined his game as a backup player. I made a mistake. I had forgotten how much of an utter knobhead he was, and paid for it. My character was a sailor in a pirate world. She had spent 17 years on boats and vessels. I rolled a nat 1 on setting sail at the beginning of the game. Pep went on to describe how my character had never been on a boat and that boats were too complicated for her. I should have expected this. I really should have. But the other players could have redeemed the experience, I thought. In combat, one of his players took, and I say this with all fucking honesty, 40 minutes every turn. This player began by describing where they stood, what color their gun was, how it shone, how that shine reflected back in his eyes, the ghost of his parents, what those parents did as they died, what they were like before that, how it related to him, and on, and on, and on. For 40 minutes. Combat lasted 2.5 hours. We only went through turn order twice. Twice! Among 6 players. I could have wept. I went into the text chat after the session and said, "Hey guys, I think it would be appreciated if each player's turn was limited to 5 minutes in combat to keep things going a little faster." I was met with outrage. How dare I ever suggest everyone get 5 minutes? Combat would take far too long. No one would ever take 5 minutes. My mistake. They were right. They could never go as low as 5 minutes. It was stupid of me even to ask. I dropped out. Sometime later in our final interaction, Pep asked me to play in a game with him, his girlfriend, and my ex. I reluctantly agreed, because I generally don't mind everyone but Pep. If nothing else, they would make it fun and I could have more terrible stories to tell about Pep at that point. But I specifically told Pep that the game would not be some attempt to get me back together with my ex. Pep agreed. He declared he would never do that. Even cows, one of the most innocuous group of lovely creatures on this planet, knew that was a lie. Pep had become obsessed with the idea of getting the gang back together. Later on, Pep's girlfriend was messaging me. She was asking about my day-to-day life, and I informed her that I was seeing someone. She excitedly asked if she could tell Pep. I said sure, I wasn't going to hide the information. Pep heard the news. Immediately, he began screeching like a dumpster gremlin. Or so I assumed by his floundering incompetence over text. He made his girlfriend tell me what he was saying. Such things like, "You have ruined my entire game. I hope you're happy. And if you want to play it in my game, you have to leave your boyfriend." I explained to her that if he truly had no ulterior motives, my relationship status from 5 minutes ago would have had as much influence as it did now. Whatever he was planning required I be single, and whatever it was, I wanted no part in. I was very glad to have personally ruined his game. Rejoice, for I was free. Epilogue. It has been a long time since Pep ever tried to contact me. There were many more instances of Pep being creepy, gross, and disgusting to me and others. However, I've since forgotten them. I have met wonderful people through Pep, despite what an absolute bag of toenails he is. And some of those people I've since kept contact with or miss dearly. However, I will never miss Pep or his games ever again. And I've finally found other groups to play with that don't suck ass. What an absolute ride. I picked this story for 2 reasons. The first is, well, it was really fun to read. Of all of my reading videos, I think this one is probably my current favorite, even if it did take me more than 1 day to edit, unlike the other ones, but I hope you guys had as much fun listening to it as I had reading it. The second and more important reason is I think that the OP puts it quite perfectly why a lot of people in these stories don't just leave like we have convinced ourselves is so easy to do. It's hard for me to sit here and explain every nuance of that subject without going on another 30-minute long ramble about it, but let me tell you a different story. In elementary school, I did not have any friends. The majority of the quote-unquote friends I had throughout school were, the children of my parents' friends, and that doesn't really mean we have a close, friendly bond with each other like my parents thought we did. And the periods there were kids I would actually consider friends, I almost only ever had 3 friends, maximum. And one of these friends was a horrible, horrible friend. She was just cruddy, but, you're a child and you have no other friends. You're desperate. You'll take anything. One day, though, this friend just decided to randomly, in the middle of a conversation, declare that she was no longer friends with me, that she was not going to be talking to me anymore, for a reason that I truly don't know, and even the other friend has confessed to me she doesn't even truly know. However, in that instant when she just left me and walked away, my other friend looked at me and walked away with her. Again, I could go on and on and on about it, but I do want everyone to consider this. When you're desperate for friends, you will not ever want to rock the boat, even a little bit. When you're desperate for friends, your comfort doesn't matter, because you being uncomfortable is better than you having no more friends. And even if you want to say, well, your friends won't do that to you, they won't just abandon you because of you're uncomfortable, or they'll listen to you, they'll trust you. It doesn't always work that way. Like I said, even when I had a friend who was clearly in the wrong, my only other friend still walked away with her and did not stay with me. It does happen, and there is a reason people get paranoid about it. But anyway, enough of me being serious. I would love to hear your thoughts and your own experience down in the comments below. A huge thank you once again to all of my lovely patrons who have been scrolling across the screen right here, and an extra special thank you to my $50 patrons, Banana Blotti and our newest Zodiac, AJ Hall. Thank you both so much for being Zodiacs, and if any of you out there are interested in becoming a patron, you can check out the links down in the description below. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Zodiac, out.